running on empty.
Well, you've been introduced to Brent Hodge, but let me just personally welcome you, my brother. I'm thrilled you're on board, and we're very excited to have Brent get to know you, and you get to know him better and his lovely family, his wife Tammy. They have a son who's married, Coda, married to Annie. And then we know and already love their daughter Cassidy, who's one of our worship leaders. So Brent, just from my heart and the heart of this church to you, welcome to the team.
Thank you, sir, man. Cal Church, it's great to be here, and I know this is a strange season for you to get to know me, and so it might be a little more difficult, but I'm available. I'm online. You can catch me on email. We've got that on the website. I'd love to meet you even in this season, but so grateful to be here, Brad. It's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, I'm glad you're going to be teaching with me today, so thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Bless you, brother.
Good to be here.
Well, we are in part 4 of a 5-part series that we're calling Running on Empty. The reason for the series is because people are stressed out emotionally, and they're stretched thin financially, and they're isolated relationally, and they're fatigued in their fear about the future. In a word, they are running on empty. They're empty. I mean, I'm convinced that we could do this type of series at any time during this pandemic and the kind of quarantine, semi-quarantine season, and we would get a crowd, because I really have observed that almost everybody is feeling a part of this. And this kind of emptiness cost us. It cost us in our energy that we could have spent in more productive ways on the relationships that matter and our goals in life. It cost us in our depth. I mean, we're skimming because we just don't have the energy to go deep. We're superficial because we're feeling very disconnected from one another. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you because I really believe it's possible to live the life that God designed us to live. And I'll tell you, His kind of life is not a life of insanity, and it's not a life of emptiness. It's a life of meaning and fulfillment and even joy. Now, wherever you are, I'm going to give you a list of words, and if you can identify with any of these words, I want you to raise your hand, unless you're driving your car right now. But otherwise, just raise your hand if you can relate to any of these words. Busy, rushed, empty, stressed, fatigued, isolated, disconnected, overloaded, or superficial. I bet a bunch of hands went up. Now, if you're new to Cal Church, whether you're a follower of Jesus Christ or not, you need to know that what I'm teaching today is not Christian or non-Christian kind of message. It's a message for just people in the 21st century and people in 2020 specifically. This emptiness, this running on empty, is, I think, universal. And for sure, it's impacting all of us in these very hard days. What I'd like everybody to do today is just make a commitment. Look, Brad, I'm going to listen, and then I will be honest. I'll be honest about what I'm feeling. I'll be honest about my pain. I'll be honest about my own level of emptiness and the consequences of living this way. And I'll be honest about not wanting to live this way anymore. So we're going to spend some time together, and I hope at the end of our time, we will all have some tools that will help us be deeper, stronger, healthier, more joyful people. And I think that's a desire of your heart. I know it is for mine. So let's take on a few of the things that keep us empty. I'm calling some of these deceptions that keep us running on empty. These are lies that we believe that really contribute to this sense of, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do it anymore. Here's some lies that we believe, some deceptions that keep us empty. Deception number 1, there's not enough time to do everything. You're like, Brad, I just can't handle anymore the restrictions of the pandemic. I'm doing my kids' activities online. I'm working from home. I'm having a Zoom meeting with work, and a baby is crying in the background. I'm trying to be a good spouse, a good friend, a good child for my aging parents. Brad, there's just not enough time to do everything. And what I want you to know is that's a deception, and here's why. You weren't designed by God to do everything. See, the lie is, if I had more time, I could get it all done. But the truth is, you weren't designed to be doing everything that you're likely doing right now. See, fundamentally, God gives us all the time we need to do everything that He would like us to do. If I'm feeling overwhelmed as a follower of Jesus, it's because I've allowed some unnecessary things to occupy space that should be reserved just for the necessary. Does that make sense? I mean, I've taken on stuff that's not mine to carry. And listen, we do this so much and it becomes so normative and we feel so overwhelmed by it and we don't want to take responsibility for doing it. And so you know what we do? I mean, this is weird, but we blame God. I mean, we'll say things like, well, God, that daylight savings thing where I get an extra hour in my day, if you could do that for me every day, God, or, God, way back when you were setting all this up, you created a 7-day week, but you could have created an 8-day week, and I know if I just had 8 days a week, I'd be able to get everything done. And that's a deception. Here's another lie that we believe. Deception number 2. Well, it's just a season. I mean, I'm just in this season right now, but this isn't going to be forever. You're like, Brad, I know my life is unmanageable, and I know my relationships are shallow, and I know that my pace is unsustainable, but it'll pass. It's a season. Well, here's the truth. Seasons come and seasons go, but you've been doing this for a long, long time. I mean, we insist change is just around the corner. When this season is over, I promise I'll do better. But that's a lie. Busy people don't have different seasons. Busy people have one season, and it's called a busy season. And the real truth is, it's not the season that's busy. It's the person that's busy. And if you're always overwhelmed, and you have been for a long, long time, you understand this isn't just a season. This is a lifestyle. And it keeps you empty. Here's deception number 3. But this is really important. Like, you don't understand, bro. Like, I would give up some things if I could, but the things I'm doing right now, they're really, really important. This person is important. This meeting is important. This opportunity I have, I mean, it's important. And what we do, we line all of these things up in front of us, and we falsely believe that they're equally important. And because we think they're equally important, we don't know how to let any of it go. We've lost our ability to discern what matters and what doesn't matter. Look at this. We fill our lives, but our lives are not fulfilled. Here's another part to this problem. We don't just stack onto our day what we think is important. We also allow other people to stack into our lives the stuff that they think is important. I mean, have you ever found yourself taking on someone else's emergency or feeling their urgency or adding someone else's task to your workload? And then their problem becomes my problem. And then their burden becomes my burden. And I add it to my day and my to-do list and my calendar. We have to pay attention to this. Because what's happening is we're running on empty, and we don't have discernment, and we don't have wisdom, and we don't have the perspective we need to take a breath and take a minute and say, oh, wait a minute. Some of this stuff should not be on my plate. We just keep saying yes to more and more and more. Listen, if you and I were able to go out for a meal, and how nice would that be? I mean, of course, sitting outside and socially distanced, we'd be appropriate about it. But if I were to just, peek into your heart and ask, what really matters to you? Like, what really is valuable to you? I know not everybody would say the same thing, but I'll tell you what many of us would say. Many would say, God matters to me. My relationship with Jesus matters to me. And my relationship with friends and family, those matter to me. And then, my work life matters or my school life matters. We would say these are the things I value. But then if you were to pull out your calendar at this lunch that we're having together and we were to just walk through it, would your schedule align with what you say is valuable, or would your calendar contradict what you say is valuable? And see, when you're running on empty, you don't have any time to sit back and get perspective on this, to get a sense of real clarity about this. Our vision is blurry and our values are confused. And we crumble under pressure. And here's what we do. We elevate things that aren't important, and we devalue things that are important. Here's what I've learned from about a half a century of doing this wrong. We can make better choices, and we can live a better life. Now, What I'd like to do is move this from just like my opinion and pontificating about this. I'd like to move it to God's wisdom. I want us all to learn how to choose better rather than to choose busy. A follower of Jesus, he was a medical doctor. His name was Luke, and he wrote a biography about Jesus. And so many of the stories that he records that happened in the life of Jesus are instructive for me. And one of the stories he tells, one of the encounters Jesus had with a couple of women, gives us insight on this topic, because one chooses better and one chooses busy. And what's interesting is in a very short little snippet of this interaction, we find some incredible truth. This is found in Luke, the biography he wrote about Jesus, the book of Luke, chapter 10, and here's what we find. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." Jesus said, "Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things. But only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen," look at this, "Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." Like I said, in a very short little conversation, there is a lot here that we can unpack. Jesus comes to this woman's house. He has his 12 disciples. It was customary at the time, if you were a guest in someone's house, they would wash your feet from the dirt, from the dirt roads and your sandals and all that, and then they would offer you some food. So as they come in, we get the impression from the text that Martha hurries off to the kitchen to be hospitable, and she ends up being too hospitable. I mean, this Martha was probably the very first Martha Stewart in the world and the queen of hospitality, and she busied herself. But her sister Mary made another choice. She enjoyed the presence of the Son of God who had come to visit her very home. And she spent time with the Messiah. The bottom line is that Martha chose busy and Mary chose better. Pastor Brent's going to come now and help us further unpack this story.
Thanks, Brad. So you just heard this story about Martha, and what I want to do is just for the next few moments, I want to dig in and help us see something. I want to help us see that there's a pattern of getting overwhelmed in this story that I think we can learn a lot from. Now, here's the first thing that we see. We begin with good intentions. Things start with good intentions. Martha began with good intentions. Martha was just being hospitable. Martha was doing the right things. She opened her home. She was making a meal. She was preparing a place for Jesus to rest. For a lot of us online today, so many things in our life began with good intentions. You had good intentions for your kids and how you wanted to raise them. You had good intentions for your career and where you wanted to see that go. You had good intentions for the way we wanted to serve Jesus and be a part of the church. You had good intentions to provide for your family. See, the good intentions get the ball rolling. It makes the activity start to happen, but then something along the way moves in. That's when this happens. Distractions take place. Distractions move in. See, you begin with good intentions and then you get distracted. That's exactly what happened to Martha. In verse 40, it says she was distracted. She started to focus on things that were the wrong thing to focus on. So think about it. Jesus walks into your house. He comes, he sits down on your couch next to you. He says, "Hey, let's talk for a little while." And you go, "You know what? Just a minute. I want to listen to Pastor Brent first." Would you do that? No. And I'm begging you, don't do that. Choose Jesus every time. See, you start with good intentions. It's like this. I'm going to be a part of Cal Church. I want to follow Jesus. I want to build relationships with others. Then things happen. Priorities change. You get distracted. The things that are important are no longer important. You started well, but then listen to this. This is what happens. When you're derailed by distractions, those distractions can appear as if they are priorities, and those false priorities make you miss what truly matters. Staying focused on what truly matters is hard to do. So we have good intentions, but then we start to get distracted. Next, what happens is pressure and pity arrive. At this point, you are now overwhelmed. Again, Martha speaks to Jesus and says, Lord, don't you care? Now, we don't know in this text what was set Martha off. We don't know what was kind of the boiling point that set her over the edge. We don't know if she was cooking in the kitchen, dropped a pot, it slammed down on the carton of eggs, which splattered all over her fig dessert, and then that scared the camels, and they started spitting at everybody, and the whole time the disciples are yelling from the other room that they wanted coffee refills, as if this was some sort of Damascus Denny's. We don't know what caused the pressure and brought on the pity party, but we know it happened. It was too much, and she snapped. By the way, that's usually a sign that you are running on empty. When you have no margin in your life, when you have no more emotional reserves to pull you from when things go wrong, you start to say and do things that you later regret. You snap. Look, I've done that. Can I get a witness? Someone raise your hand if you've done the same thing. Don't point at people, just raise your hand. So Martha asks, Lord, don't you care? So pressure enters and pity comes. You've done this. I've done this. You know what this looks like? It's like this. My spouse just doesn't understand the pressure of all I do for this marriage. Or my spouse doesn't feel the pressure I feel to provide for our family. Or this, my parents don't understand the pressure I feel in school. My friends don't understand the pressure I feel to pay my bills. No one understands how hard it is to be me. See, we start with good intentions, then distractions arise, we lose focus, pressure builds, we get stressed out, we start to feel pity, and you know what happens next? Resentment. When pity is present, resentment follows. Again, in verse 40, Martha has another classic line. She says to Jesus, Jesus, tell her to help me. You can hear the resentment in her voice. Now she's blaming Mary for the way she's feeling. Jesus, tell her to get in here. I've got a lot to do. We need to feed you. We need to wash your feet. Mary needs to be in here so we can prepare this place for you better. She needs to be on my page right now. Resentment is the sign of emotional emptiness. So, how do we summarize this whole text? Well, we get back to this. We have to choose better. And busy, distracted, pressure-filled living is not better. If you and I are going to be able to choose better, we have got to be able to recognize this pattern of getting overwhelmed in our own lives. Because here's the deal. Remember this? We must desire those words of Jesus. You've chosen better. He told us Mary chose better. Martha worked. Mary worshiped. Mary chose better. Martha was distracted. Mary was focused. Mary chose better. Martha felt pressure while Mary felt peace because she chose better. While Martha was filled with resentment, Mary was filled with enjoyment because Mary chose better. There's something really interesting about Mary in the Bible. More we can learn from her. She's mentioned 3 different places in the Bible, and each time she's mentioned in the Bible, we see her doing one thing, sitting at the feet of Jesus. Mary understood what was right and what was important. Mary chose to sit with Jesus. Mary chose better. Now, my gut says this. If you and I had a choice, we would want to have the heart of Mary. We would want to know that instinctively in our lives, that we would choose better. But here's the deal. We live in a Martha world. This is a world of busyness and distraction and pressure. And some of you may even have Martha wiring in your personality. But in your heart, you want what Mary had, and that was a focus on what matters most, a focus on Jesus. You instinctively want your soul to be close to Jesus. We are drawn instinctively to God. That's why you're listening to this today. And for those of you who don't have a relationship with God, you're looking for something. Why would you still be listening? Because you're on a spiritual journey. We are all on a spiritual journey headed towards Jesus. So, how do you get where you want to be with Jesus? And how do you develop the heart of Mary? Pastor Brad's going to come back up and share more with us about that.
Well, thank you, Brent, and you're exactly right. We do want a heart like Mary. I mean, if given the choice to be with Jesus or be busy, we would absolutely want to be filled with the experience of living our lives close to Christ. So let's talk about how to do that. First of all, we have to confess those deceptions. Now, we talked about these deceptions at the beginning today. Like that idea of, well, I am so busy, I just can't get it all done. There's just not enough hours in the day, and all of that. Well, the truth of it is, we're allowing ourselves to stay stuck because we're living in that deceptive place. So if we can acknowledge, you know what? I'm just lying to myself. I'm not getting any better at this because I'm living in deception. So when you begin to think there's just not enough time to do everything, what I want you to do is go to a mirror, look in it, and say, liar, liar, pants on fire. Or if you hear yourself trying to convince your spouse or your roommate or a friend, I've just got to do this. It's really, really important. I've got to fit it in somehow. I want you to give your friends permission to hit you with the stick, because we're not getting any better as long as we live with these lies. So confess, I've just mismanaged my life. It's become a lifestyle. I'm not choosing what's best. I confess. Number two, you have to name what's distracting you. Now remember what Brent just taught us. We begin with good intentions, like I'm going to live for Christ, I'm going to do it God's way, I want my best life, but then, oh, I also want this, and we begin to add in, and we get distracted from what matters most. This is so important. So here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to write down everything you do. I mean, think about all of your appointments, all of the events that you have to go to, all the activities you have to participate in, all the Zoom calls you have to be on. Think about everything you have to do with family and friends and for yourself. I mean, just make a list of all of it. And then ask yourself, of all of this, what really matters? And am I getting to it? Like, am I giving my very best to experience these things I say I want? Or have I allowed these distractions to get in the way? So you confess that you're living with these deceptions. And then second, you name or you identify what has taken your eye off the ball. You name your distractions. I mean, maybe the most spiritual thing you could do this week is just break out a big can of no on some of those distractions. Not going to do it anymore. Not going to let them get in the way. Probably the most spiritual thing you could do this week. And then here's the third point. Choose what's better. After you confess what is the deception, and after you name what is the distraction, now you're free to say, this is what matters in my life, and I'm going to choose it. Can you imagine getting to the end of every day and hearing the whisper of God just, breathe across your heart? You have chosen better today. You have chosen what matters most today. I mean, there's the reward. This is the joy. This is fundamental to following Jesus Christ. When we go our own way, when we choose lesser things, when we allow our lives to get filled with clutter, when we're feeling stressed and overwhelmed all the time, Jesus is saying, that is not the life I want you to live. Come and live my way. When we live close to Christ, when we follow the way and example of Christ, it's what it means to be a follower of Christ. It's as simple as that, and it is as complex as that. So here's what I want to do to help you choose better. I want to give you a couple of questions to think about as you go through this week. So the first question is, what is your standard for what is better? What is your standard for what is better? So for me, it's the life and example of Jesus. Like, what did Jesus actually say? What did Jesus actually do? What has Jesus asked from me? So getting to know Christ, walking with Christ, listening to Jesus, that's my standard. Now, do I get this right all the time? Absolutely not. But this is what I strive for. This is what I aspire to do, is follow the leadership of Jesus in my life. Have a daily walk with Christ so that he can direct my path to those best things. Now, I find out about Jesus from the Scriptures. So knowing the Scriptures, reading the Scriptures, absorbing those helps me set a standard. This is what I'm shooting for, about the difference between good, better, and best. I want my best life. And I find that standard in the ways and the teaching of Jesus. Second, I ask myself, so are my choices aligning with my standard? Like I say, the life of Jesus matters. I say following Jesus matters. But if I look at my decisions, is there alignment? Very often what we see is that we say one thing matters, but in reality our life contradicts that. So what's my standard? Am I making choices to align with that standard? And then here's the third question. And this is very, very practical, and I hope some of you will take me up on this. What do I need to say no to today? I mean, you literally just began crossing some things out, giving yourself some space, giving yourself some margin. Here's one of the most helpful life management insights I could ever give you, and I've taught this many times over our years at this church. Every yes is a no to something else. Now I want you to think about that. If I say yes to this, then I'm going to cheat myself out of this because I don't have time to do everything, and I wasn't designed to do everything. So if I say yes to staying late at work, I have cheated my family out of some of my time that evening. If I say yes to just, wasting the weekend in front of the television, I have said no to developing and deepening my friendships, relationships, or other things that I say matter to me. I mean, this is exactly what we see in this story with Jesus. Martha said yes to work, and so she cheated herself out of time with Jesus Christ. You get the idea. You get to choose what gets cheated and what gets added to your life. I want to ask you to imagine what your life might look like if you had some margin, if you had some breathing room in your schedule. I want you to imagine what it would look like if you had significant time for significant relationships, unrushed, so that you can enjoy those and experience those and deepen those. What if you had time in your life for what you say really matters most? When you consistently begin to slow your pace, when you consistently begin to open your calendar, when you consistently allow a busy, crazy life to fade, here's what happens. You stop running on empty. And you start walking at a reasonable pace, filled with the presence of Jesus. And when you're filled with Jesus, that kind of splashes out on everything you do. It colors all your relationships and the experiences that you have every day. A heart filled with God is what God desires for you. And a heart filled with God is what you have been looking for you. Let's pray together. Jesus, one of the things I love about us gathering together online and in your presence is that for an hour, we can just rest. We can reflect. We can allow ourselves to be challenged by the Scriptures. We can have our perspective adjusted and clarified. We can sing songs of praise. It does our soul good. But then here's what happens. We log off the computer and very quickly jump right back into the rat race. And that doesn't do our soul well. We dry up. We overschedule. We run on empty. Our perspective gets fuzzy again. We make decisions that are poor, and we choose things that are not what's best for us. So God, we're just asking for your help with this. Give us wisdom that's so much greater than our own. Give us courage to say yes to what matters and to say no to what matters less. We know that we all have to go to work. We all have jobs. We all have hard areas of life. But Jesus, please teach us to do it at a pace that leaves time for you and for what's better in life. This is our dream. You've wired this into our DNA to want to know you and to experience you and to live with you. But we can't do that on our own power. There's something empty in us that only you can fill. And we ask you to do that right now. And we pray for this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Well, don't log off just yet, because our band will be right back.